Captain Lee Hyun gripped the metal railing of his ship's bridge as the emergency broadcast crackled through space. The holographic display showed the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, its crystal walls reflecting the panic of 100 different alien species. Representatives from across the galaxy had gathered for one terrifying reason: the Devourers had returned. The massive viewing screen dominated the bridge of the UES Harmony, humanity's flagship exploration vessel. Lee Hyun watched as Ambassador Kim Nari stepped forward to address the council. Her voice carried clearly through the transmission, steady despite the chaos around her. "Honorable members of the Galactic Council," Kim Nari began, her human features calm among the writhing tentacles and crystalline forms of alien delegates. "Earth offers its full support in coordinating evacuation efforts and defensive positions. Our exploration fleet may be small, but we have ships positioned throughout the outer rim." A thunderous sound erupted from the council chamber. Not applause, but the collective scoffs and dismissive clicks of hundreds of alien voices. The camera panned to show High Chancellor Vextar of the Zelthrian Empire, his 6 arms gesturing dismissively while his reptilian head swayed with arrogance. "The human delegation is dismissed," Vextar declared, his voice booming through universal translators. "This matter requires species with actual military capability. Your primitive vessels would be nothing more than debris against the ancient enemy." Lee Hyun felt his hands clench into fists as laughter rippled through the alien assembly. Beside him, Lieutenant Park Soo's face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. The young officer's fingers danced across his control panel, switching between tactical displays that showed the true scope of what was happening. "Captain, look at this," Park Soo whispered urgently. The main display shifted to show a galactic map dotted with thousands of points of light. Each one represented a world, a station, a colony where beings lived and worked. As they watched, the lights began going dark one by one. The Korthak Empire's massive dreadnoughts were already pulling back from the frontier. These ships were legendary, each one the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. But instead of moving toward the threat, they retreated toward the Empire's core worlds. The sight of those mighty vessels fleeing sent chills through every human on the bridge. "Sir, the ethereal collective just sealed their borders," reported Communications Officer Young Min, her voice tight with disbelief. "They've activated their quantum barriers. Nothing gets in or out of their space now." One by one, the great civilizations of the galaxy were abandoning the outer rim. The Aquarian Federation recalled their bioships from the water worlds. The machine collective powered down their monitoring stations. The crystal singers went silent, their harmonic networks falling dark across dozens of systems. Lieutenant Park Soo pulled up another display, this one showing refugee signals flooding their communications array. Distress calls poured in from mining asteroids, research stations, trading posts, and frontier colonies. The voices speaking through the static represented dozens of species, not just humans, but all the beings the major powers considered expendable. "Captain, they're leaving everyone behind," Park Soo said, his voice cracking with emotion. "The mining colonies in the Kepler belt, the research stations studying the neutron stars, the farming worlds on the rim. There are 3 million humans out there and nobody's coming for them." Lee Hyun studied the tactical display showing Earth's small fleet scattered across the galaxy. 23 ships in total, not warships, but exploration vessels, science ships, and cargo haulers. Each one carried maybe 50 crew members and basic defensive systems meant for asteroid mining, not combat against an ancient evil that had once devoured entire civilizations. Through the bridge windows, stars twinkled peacefully, giving no hint of the terror approaching from the void between galaxies. Lee Hyun had read the classified reports about the Devourers, biomechanical nightmares that absorbed the life force of entire worlds, leaving nothing but empty husks floating in space. They had vanished mysteriously thousands of years ago, but the few records that survived painted them as unstoppable. "Sir, incoming message from Admiral Chen on Earth," Jung Min announced. "Earth Command is ordering all vessels to return to Sol System immediately for defensive positioning." Lee Hyun closed his eyes for a moment, thinking of his family back on Earth, of the blue skies and green forests that had seemed so permanent just hours ago. Following orders, meant safety for Earth's modest fleet, but it also meant abandoning millions of innocent beings to face the devourers alone. "Captain," Park Soo asked quietly, "what are your orders?" Lee Hyun opened his eyes and looked at his crew, young humans who had joined the exploration service to see the wonders of the galaxy, not to fight ancient monsters. But as he watched the refugee signals multiply on their screens, as he saw world after world going dark as their protectors fled, he knew there was only one choice a human could make. "Signal the fleet," Lee Hyun ordered, his voice carrying the weight of humanity's greatest strength, the refusal to abandon others in their darkest hour. "We're moving to the outer systems. It's time to show the galaxy what humans are really made of." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of engines as the Harmony changed course, turning away from the safety of Earth toward the approaching darkness where millions of forgotten souls waited for someone, anyone, to answer their calls for help. Dr. Choi Min rubbed her tired eyes as she stared at the holographic display floating above the makeshift command table on Kepler Station. The space station had been a simple research outpost just days ago, studying cosmic radiation patterns in the outer rim. Now it served as the unlikely headquarters for the biggest rescue operation in galactic history. The numbers glowing in blue light before her told a story of abandonment that made her stomach turn. 12 million beings scattered across 47 different star systems, all left behind when their own governments fled to safety. She scrolled through the list with growing horror. Mining colonies with 50,000 workers, agricultural, worlds feeding entire sectors, research stations pushing the boundaries of science. "Doctor, you need to see this," Engineer Yang Ho called from across the crowded command center. His usually calm voice carried a tremor of disbelief. The burly engineer had spent years working with different alien species, but what he was seeing on his tactical display shook him to his core. "The Aquarians left their own people," Yang Ho continued, pointing to underwater colony markers on his screen. 3 complete cities on Oceania Prime, each one home to 2 million Aquarians. They just abandoned them. Their own species, Doctor. How do you abandon your own children? The Aquarians were known throughout the galaxy for their family bonds. Their cities built in perfect harmony beneath alien seas. Their bioships could dive through water and space with equal grace, their technology grown rather than built. But when the Devourers returned, even these close-knit communities had been sacrificed by their leaders. Captain Song Yi moved between the control stations like a conductor leading a desperate orchestra. Her research vessel, Discovery, had been converted into a rescue command ship, its science labs now filled with refugee coordination equipment. The bridge buzzed with activity as dozens of humans and aliens worked side by side. Cargo ship, Friendship, reports successful evacuation of Mining Station Delta 7, announced Lieutenant Park Da from the communications array. 4,000 Vorthak civilians safely aboard and heading to Sanctuary Point. Song Yi nodded, checking another location off her ever-growing list. The human fleet had transformed since leaving Earth's protective embrace. Word had spread through the commercial networks. Humanity was trying to save everyone, even species that had never shown them kindness. Freighter captains had volunteered their cargo holds for refugees. Scientists had converted their laboratories into medical bays. Even luxury cruise ships had joined the effort, their passenger decks now housing families from a dozen different worlds. "Captain, we've got 3 more volunteer ships joining from the Centauri trade route," reported Navigator Lim Soo, her voice bright with amazement. "A mining barge, 2 agricultural haulers, and something called a party yacht from the entertainment district." The sight through the station's viewing windows was unlike anything in recorded history. Ships that had never been designed to work together moved in careful formation. Human vessels flew alongside Vorthak crystal ships that gleamed like living jewels. Chittery hive ships buzzed around larger vessels like protective insects around their queen. Even some automated cargo drones had been reprogrammed to help, their AI cores choosing compassion over their original profit-driven directives. Suddenly, alarm klaxons began wailing throughout the station. Lim Soo's face went pale as her sensor reading spiked into the red zone. "We've got company," she announced, her voice cutting through the noise. "Contact bearing 27 Mark 8, multiple vessels, massive energy signatures." The main display shifted to show space beyond the station, and everyone fell silent. Dark shapes moved between the stars like living shadows, their forms twisted and organic, yet clearly technological. These were the Devourer scout ships, and each one dwarfed humanity's largest vessel. The lead scout ship resembled a massive sea creature, crossed with a machine, its hull pulsing with veins of sickly green energy. Smaller craft swarmed around it like parasites, their movements disturbingly alive. These weren't ships built by any recognizable technology. They had been grown, evolved, shaped by an intelligence that viewed all other life as food. Hull analysis complete, Yang Ho reported, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. Those scouts are each roughly 8 times the mass of our largest ship. The energy readings suggest biomechanical fusion cores, possibly powered by organic matter. Dr. Choi Min felt a chill run down her spine. The Devourers didn't just destroy civilizations, they consumed them, turning living beings into fuel for their terrible journey across the void. But something remarkable was happening. In the command center around her, instead of panic, she saw determination. The Vorthak technicians at the energy stations began sharing data with human engineers, their crystalline forms humming with focused intent. The insectoid Chittery clicked rapidly among themselves before approaching the tactical displays with information about swarm coordination tactics. "Doctor, look at this," called Kim Jun, a young communications officer who had been monitoring the refugee networks. His eyes were wide with wonder as data streams flowed across his console. "The species we're rescuing, they're not just sitting, they're waiting. They're organizing, sharing technology, working together." She moved to his station and saw something that made her heart race with hope. The Vorthak, masters of energy manipulation, were teaching other species how to boost shield generators. The Chittery, experts in group coordination, were sharing swarm tactics that could help smaller ships work as one unit. The Aquarians had contributed their bioship regeneration technology, allowing damaged vessels to heal themselves. Species that the Galactic Council had written off as primitive or irrelevant were revealing capabilities that had been ignored for centuries. The galaxy's elite had been so focused on their own superiority that they had never bothered to learn what the lesser races could do. "Captain," Kim Jun said, his voice filled with awe as he watched the coordination displays light up with new connections between species. "I think we're building something the galaxy has never seen before." Through the station windows, the Devourer scouts continued their approach, but they were no longer facing scattered prey. They were approaching something unprecedented, an alliance born not from treaties or politics, but from the simple recognition that every life had value worth defending. The sound of plasma torches and metal cutting filled every corner of Kepler Station as the retrofit work continued around the clock. Chief Engineer Park Min moved between workstations like a master conductor, coordinating teams of humans and aliens who had never worked together before, but were now united by desperate necessity. "Careful with that power coupling," Park Min called out to a team of Vorthak engineers whose crystalline bodies glowed softly as they worked. "The human ships weren't designed for your energy frequencies, but we can make it work if we reroute through the secondary grid." Nearby, a group of Chittery workers buzzed around a cargo vessel, their insect-like forms surprisingly gentle, as they installed refugee sleeping pods where grain containers once sat. Their natural ability to work in perfect coordination made them ideal for the tight, complicated spaces inside converted ships. The transformation happening across the fleet was nothing short of miraculous. Cargo ships that once carried grain and manufactured goods now featured rows of emergency shelters and medical bays. Research vessels had their laboratories converted into communication centers and tactical planning rooms. Even luxury passenger liners had been stripped of their entertainment decks to make room for refugee families. Dr. Lee so stood before a mixed group of engineers from 6 different species, her hands moving as she explained human engineering philosophy. The Vorthak engineers towered over her, their crystal bodies reflecting the workshop lights like living prisms, while the smaller Chittery clustered around her feet, their antennae twitching with interest. "It's not about the technology," Dr. Lee so explained, holding up a simple wrench alongside a Vorthak energy tool that looked like a glowing crystal wand. Your tools are more advanced, yes, but sometimes the simple solution is the best solution. It's about making do with what we have and thinking outside the normal patterns. She demonstrated by showing how human duct tape could seal a breach that fancy Vorthak energy fields couldn't handle, while Vorthak crystal matrices could power systems that human batteries never could. The aliens watched with fascination as she combined technologies in ways their advanced civilizations had never considered. Admiral Baek Jin stood on the bridge of the Defiance, humanity's newest and strangest vessel. The ship had been hastily assembled from the hull of a deep space explorer, but now it bristled with weapons and communication arrays donated by dozens of species. The bridge itself was a patchwork of human, Vorthak, and Chitauri technology, with holographic displays floating next to simple analog gauges. Around him, the holographic displays showed their impossible task in stark detail. 47 star systems stretched across the outer rim, each one marked with refugee populations and defensive positions. The numbers were overwhelming. Millions of beings to protect with a fleet of converted civilian vessels facing an enemy that had once consumed entire galactic civilizations. "Admiral, we're getting reports from the outer sensor nets," announced Intelligence Officer Yoon Ha, her young face tense with concentration. "Devourer advance forces are probing our defensive perimeters. 3 systems have reported contact with scout ships." Baek Jin studied the tactical display, watching as red markers appeared at the edge of their territory. The Devourer ships moved in patterns unlike anything in their military databases. Organic, flowing, like schools of predatory fish testing the waters before a feeding frenzy. "Signal all defensive positions," he ordered. "Prepare for first contact protocols. This isn't a drill anymore." The first real battle came at Sigma Colony, a mining settlement on the edge of an asteroid field. Commander Onar led a small squadron of converted vessels, 2 cargo haulers fitted with mining lasers, a research ship bristling with improvised missile pods, and her own command vessel, a former luxury yacht that now served as a mobile command center. "Enemy contacts bearing down on the colony," reported Tactical Officer Kim Do from his station aboard Onar's ship. 3 large biomechanical vessels, energy signatures off the charts. "They're bigger than anything we've faced in simulations." Through the tactical display, Onar watched as the Devourer ships emerged from the void like nightmares made real. Each vessel was a twisted fusion of living tissue and dark metal, their hulls pulsing with veins of sickly energy. Smaller craft swarmed around them like parasites, their movements disturbingly alive and predatory. "All ships, open fire," Onar commanded. "Target the lead vessel. Concentrate fire on what looks like command structures." The human ships opened up with everything they had. Mining lasers designed to cut through asteroids lanced out at the enemy vessels, followed by volleys of improvised missiles. The energy beams struck the Devourer ships and seemed to be absorbed into their organic hulls, the biomechanical tissue rippling and adapting. "They're absorbing our energy weapons," Kim Do reported, his voice tight with growing panic. "Conventional weapons aren't working. The hulls are adapting faster than we can damage them." But Commander Onar had spent years working in asteroid fields, and she understood something the galaxy's military academies had never taught. Sometimes the environment itself was your best weapon. "All ships, fall back into the asteroid field," she ordered. "Kim Do, calculate trajectories for mining charges. We're going to give these monsters a lesson in human creativity." The converted vessels dove between massive asteroids, using their superior maneuverability to stay ahead of the larger Devourer ships. As the enemy followed them deeper into the field, Onar's plan became clear. "Deploy mining charges, maximum dispersal pattern," she commanded. "Wait for my signal." The asteroid field lit up with explosions as precisely placed charges shattered massive rocks into deadly debris clouds. The Devourer ships, designed for open space combat, found themselves pelted with tons of high-velocity rock fragments. Their biomechanical hulls, so effective at absorbing energy, were torn and battered by simple kinetic impacts. "Direct hit on the lead vessel," Kim Do shouted with excitement. "Hull breach detected. They're leaking atmosphere and none or whatever they breathe." The Devourer ships retreated, Their organic intelligence clearly confused by tactics that didn't appear in any military database. They had expected energy weapons and organized fleet formations, not improvised explosives and environmental warfare. News of the victory spread through the refugee networks faster than light-speed communications. On stations and ships across the Outer Rim, beings who had given up hope began to believe again. The mighty Devourers could be hurt, could be driven back by ordinary people using extraordinary courage and creativity. In her quarters aboard the Defiance, Dr. Lee So received reports from engineering teams across the fleet. The victory at Sigma Colony had taught them something valuable. The enemy's greatest strength could also be their weakness. Biomechanical ships that adapted to energy weapons struggled against simple kinetic attacks. "Admiral," she reported to Beck Jin, "I think we've found our edge. They're too advanced for their own good. Sometimes simple is better." For the first time in months, hope began to flicker in the darkness of space, carried by the most unlikely alliance the galaxy had ever seen. The darkness of space erupted with the arrival of the main Devourer fleet and Intelligence Officer Yoon. Ha felt her blood turn to ice as the sensor readings flooded her display aboard the Defiance. What she saw defied imagination, a swarm of biomechanical nightmares stretching across the void like a plague of metal locusts descending upon the galaxy. Each Devourer capital ship was a twisted fusion of living tissue and dark technology, their hulls pulsing with veins of sickly green energy. The smallest of these monsters dwarfed entire human cities, while the largest could have swallowed Earth's moon whole. They moved through space with an unsettling organic grace, like giant sea creatures swimming through an ocean of stars. Estimated enemy strength, 12,000 capital ships, Yunha reported, her voice barely steady as she processed the overwhelming numbers. Supporting craft, I've stopped counting at 50,000. Sir, our forces number 300 converted vessels. Admiral Beck Jin stood silent for a long moment, studying the tactical display that showed their impossible situation. Every computer simulation, every tactical analysis pointed to the same conclusion: total annihilation within the first hour of engagement. The mathematics of warfare were brutally simple, and they were not in humanity's favor. From their fortress worlds scattered across the galaxy, the major powers watched through long-range sensors as the ancient enemy revealed its true strength. In the crystal spires of the Zelthrian Empire, military advisors shook their heads in grim satisfaction. The primitive humans would be swept aside like dust, proving their earlier dismissal had been correct. But Admiral Beck Jin looked beyond the numbers to something more important: the evacuation status boards, showing millions of beings still trapped in the outer systems. Refugee transports were still loading families, children, elderly beings who had nowhere else to run. The great civilizations had abandoned them, but these forgotten souls had found something better than government protection. They had found each other. "All ships, this is Admiral Beck," he broadcast to the entire fleet, his voice carrying across 300 vessels and touching the hearts of beings from dozens of different worlds. "We knew this day would come. Today we don't fight for victory. We fight to give others hope. We fight so that innocence can escape into the darkness and find light again." The battle began at the edge of the Kepler system as Captain Lee Hyun led the first wave of human ships directly into the teeth of the enemy formation. His vessel Harmony dove between massive Devourer capital ships like a tiny fighter weaving among giants, her hull gleaming silver against the dark biomechanical monsters surrounding her. The Devourer ships tried to target the small human vessels with their main weapons, massive energy cannons designed to crack planets. But the human ships were simply too small and fast. It was like trying to shoot mosquitoes with artillery cannons. Frustrated, the enemy began deploying smaller biocraft, squid-like creatures with razor-sharp tentacles and acid-spitting organic weapons. "Enemy fighters incoming," reported Navigator Park Jin aboard the Harmony, as swarms of biocraft erupted from the larger vessels like angry hornets from disturbed nests. "Count is everywhere, Captain. They're everywhere." Lee Hyun gripped his command chair as the ship shuddered under plasma impacts. Around him, his crew worked with deadly precision. their movements coordinated by months of desperate training. Return fire all batteries. Show them what human engineering can do. Meanwhile, deep within the battle zone, Lieutenant Commander Park Yu coordinated the final evacuation efforts from her converted transport sanctuary. Even as plasma fire lit the space around her vessel like deadly fireworks, she maintained constant communication with refugee stations throughout the system. Transport. 7 Alpha, you are clear for departure, she announced, watching another packed vessel disappear into hyperspace. Station Gamma 4, begin final evacuation protocols now. We're running out of time. Through the chaos of battle, something extraordinary began to happen. The species that the galaxy had written off as expendable started fighting with a unity that had never been seen before. Human ships covered Vorthak vessels as they recharged their crystal weapons. Jittery swarmcraft formed protective barriers around slower refugee transports. Aquarian bioships shared their regenerative technology, allowing damaged vessels to heal their wounds mid-battle. Commander Song Ho piloted his converted mining vessel, Iron Will, alongside a Vorthak crystal ship, their weapons firing in perfect synchronization. When his human lasers overheated, the Vorthak energy beams continued the barrage. When the crystal ship's power core needed recharging, human plasma cannons filled the gap. Ammunition transfer complete, reported Weapons Officer Kim Soo as a Chittery supply craft docked with their vessel. They're giving us their entire stockpile, sir. Says their hive considers us family now. The Chittery, insect-like beings who communicated through pheromones and rapid clicking sounds, had adopted the human concept of never leaving anyone behind. Their natural hive mentality expanded to include every species in the coalition, treating human children and Vorthak elders as their own offspring to be protected. On the bridge of a damaged Aquarian bioship, Captain Reef Walker coordinated with human engineers to repair systems that should have been impossible for land dwellers to understand. The Aquarians' living ships could heal themselves, but they needed time, and human ingenuity provided creative solutions to buy that precious time. The Devourers, ancient beyond measure and terrible in their hunger, found themselves facing something completely outside their experience. For millions of years, they had consumed civilizations by exploiting fear, division, and the natural selfishness of survival. Species would turn on each other when faced with extinction, making them easy prey. But here in the depths of space, they encountered an enemy that grew stronger through sacrifice rather than weaker. When human ships were damaged, alien vessels moved to protect them. When alien craft were in danger, humans flew directly into harm's way to help. Every act of selflessness seemed to inspire 10 more, creating a cascade of courage that spread through the entire coalition fleet. Captain Lee So, piloting a converted research vessel, watched in amazement as a young human pilot deliberately crashed his damaged fighter into a Devourer bioship to save a transport full of Vorthak children. The sacrifice triggered something primal in the crystal beings, who began fighting with a fury their peaceful culture had never shown before. This isn't just a battle, she whispered to herself, watching the tactical display show impossible acts of heroism occurring across the entire battlefield. This is evolution. We're becoming something new. The Devourers, for all their ancient wisdom and terrible power, had never faced an enemy that refused to break under pressure, that grew stronger when pressed to the breaking point, that found hope in the darkest moments of despair. The final battle above New Terra began like the end of everything. The planet hung in space like a blue jewel, its surface home to 15 million refugees from across the galaxy. Above it, the largest Devourer fleet ever assembled blocked out the stars, their biomechanical forms twisting and pulsing with hungry anticipation. Commander Cho Ha gripped the controls of her damaged fighter as plasma fire erupted around her cockpit. Her small vessel, patched together from human and Vorthak technology, shuddered under the impact of enemy weapons. Through her cracked view screen, she could see a massive civilian transport struggling to escape the planet's atmosphere, loaded with thousands of Chittery families. Transport New Hope. This is Fighter 7, she radioed, watching as 3 Devourer interceptors closed in on the defenseless refugee ship. I'm coming to help, Her fighter's engines screamed as she pushed them beyond their limits, diving directly into the path of the enemy vessels. The Devourer bioships turned their weapons toward her, their organic hulls rippling with aggressive patterns. Choha knew her small craft couldn't survive the encounter, but she also knew something more important. Those families deserved a chance to live. "For everyone we couldn't save," she whispered, then slammed her control stick forward, sending her fighter on a collision course with the largest Devourer ship. The explosion lit up space like a small star, and the refugee transport slipped away into hyperspace, carrying thousands of innocent lives to safety. Across the battlefield, similar acts of heroism played out like notes in a symphony of sacrifice. Engineer Kang Su stood alone in the reactor room of Defense Station Alpha, as Devourer boarding creatures poured through the hull breaches around him. The chittering, spider-like invaders moved with terrifying speed, their razor-sharp limbs designed to tear through metal and flesh with equal ease. "All stations, this is Kang Su," he broadcast over the station's communication system, his hands working frantically over the reactor controls. "Initiating manual overload sequence. Clear the area in 30 seconds. He could have escaped. Could have run to the evacuation pods like his training demanded. Instead, he stayed at his post, watching the reactor readings climb into the red zone as the Devourer creatures closed in around him. The explosion that followed took out 3 enemy capital ships and saved a dozen refugee vessels struggling to escape the system. The stories multiplied across the entire battlefield. Vorthak crystal singers used their final moments to create energy barriers that protected human vessels. Chittery swarm pilots formed living shields around damaged ships, their small craft exploding one by one, but never breaking formation. Aquarian bioship captains merged their vessel's consciousness with human crew members, sharing their life force to keep damaged ships fighting. But the turning point came in the most unlikely place. A makeshift laboratory aboard the heavily damaged research vessel Discovery, where Dr. Moonji worked alongside a team of Vorthak scientists while the battle raged around them. Their laboratory shook with each impact against the ship's hull, but they never stopped working. "Doctor, I'm detecting strange patterns in the Devourer communication signals," reported Chief Scientist Crystal Song, her crystalline form flickering with excitement. "They're not just coordinating through technology. There's something deeper." Moonji studied the data streams flowing across their shared display, her human intuition working alongside Vorthak analytical precision. The Devourer's bioships moved with too much coordination, responded too quickly to threats, adapted too perfectly to new tactics. "They're a collective consciousness," she realized suddenly, her eyes widening with understanding. "The individual ships aren't independent. They're all connected through some kind of psychic neural network. That's how they coordinate so perfectly." Crystal Song's form brightened with comprehension. "But Doctor, look at our own forces. Dozens of species, hundreds of different thought patterns, complete mental chaos from their perspective." The revelation hit Moonji like a lightning bolt. The Coalition's greatest weakness, their diversity, their inability to think with one mind, was actually their greatest strength against an enemy that depended on mental unity. "Admiral Beck, this is Dr. Moon," she broadcast to the fleet flagship, her voice cutting through the chaos of battle. "We've found their weakness. The Devourers are a hive mind. They need mental coordination to function. Our diversity is confusing their neural networks." Admiral Baek Jin received the transmission on the bridge of the Defiance as his flagship buckled under a direct hit from a Devourer superweapon. Sparks flew from damaged consoles around him, and half his crew was working through clouds of smoke and emergency lighting. "All ships concentrate fire on the neural nodes," he transmitted to the entire fleet, his voice carrying hope for the first time in hours. "Target the organic brain structures on their capital ships. Disrupt their network. Make them remember why they feared the light." The Coalition fleet responded with desperate fury. Human mining lasers, designed to cut through asteroids, began targeting the pulsing neural clusters visible on Devourer hulls. Vorthak energy weapons, powered by pure crystalline thought, disrupted the psychic connections between ships. Chittery swarmcraft coordinated precision strikes on communication organs. As the neural network began to collapse, something incredible happened. The Devourer ships, so perfectly coordinated moments before, began to move erratically. Capital. Ships collided with their own escorts. Biofighters attacked friendly vessels. The ancient collective consciousness, faced with the mental chaos of dozens of species, thinking in completely different ways, began to tear itself apart. The last Devourer command ship, a massive creature the size of a small moon, writhed in space, as its neural systems overloaded. Captain Li Min, commanding a small group of human fighters, watched in amazement as the ancient enemy simply stopped. The biomechanical giant hung motionless in space, its hull growing dark as the collective consciousness finally shattered. When the battle ended, the galaxy fell completely silent. From their hidden fortress worlds, the great civilizations emerged cautiously, their long-range sensors showing something impossible. The outer rim not only defended, but thriving. The species they had abandoned had formed something entirely. New Captain Song Mi stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt Kepler station, watching as ships from across the galaxy arrived with supplies and aid. The Galactic Council had sent formal apologies and offers of membership, but the coalition had already proven something far more important than political recognition. The station bustled with activity as humans worked alongside Vorthak engineers, Chittery technicians, and Aquarian biologists. Children from a dozen different species played together in the common areas, their laughter echoing through corridors that had once known only desperation. "Captain," said Communication Officer Li Da, approaching with a datapad in her hands. "Incoming transmission from Earth. The President wants to know when we're coming home." Song Mi smiled, looking out at the stars where humans and dozens of other species worked side by side, building something that had never existed before, a true galactic community based on mutual respect and shared sacrifice. "Tell her we are." "Home," she replied, watching a human child teaching a young Vorthak how to play catch with a simple rubber ball. "All of us. We're all home now." The galaxy had turned away when darkness threatened, but when it turned back it found that humanity and their forgotten allies had become something greater than any of them had ever been alone.